You're well. Thanks for joining us. If you haven't been here before, my name's Ken. It's 10, and that's why we can at 10. Hope you're doing well. We are estate agents based in southwest London, SW16, the lovely area of Norbury in southwest London. And if you're thinking of buying and renting or letting out a property or investing, then we're the guys you need to talk to, because we're Zone 3, close to London, and we love it here. So welcome. Thanks for joining us. Today, it's Ask JA Tuesday, and we're talking about house prices. Everyone loves house prices, don't they? They're just one of those subjects that never stops being talked about every single day. What's going to happen to house prices? The biggest question we get asked right now is what's going to happen to house prices in the light of the stamp duty deadline in March. And it would increasingly seem that it may not be the case that they're going to extend the stamp duty deadline. But there has been some talk, you may have heard, about first-time buyer mortgages and about some sort of incentive scheme where first-time buyers can get a 95% mortgage. So I'm going to talk about what I think may happen post 31st of March. But before I do, let me give you some stats and some of the numbers from some of the other commentators around the place. Land Registry says the price of a property in the UK increased by 0.7% month on month, that is, and 5.4% year on year. Of course, that's across the country, so there are massive regional fluctuations there. Experts are totally split on this, and Rightmove, for instance, forecasts that house prices will rise by 4% in 2021. It predicts a lull in the second quarter for obvious reasons, but it says it won't be make or break. Zoopla predicts annual house price growth will reach 5% in February before slowing to 1% by the end of 2021. Halifax says house prices will fall by between 2 and 5% this year. And Savills and Hamptons believe house prices will stay the same in 2021. I like Savills. I think they do some sensible reporting, as do other places. But for some reason, I always perk up and listen to what Savills have to say, because they seem to be backed up by good research. And they've now updated their predictions on the next 5 years in terms of house prices. And they say between 2020 and 2024, it expects property prices to increase by an accumulative 20.4%. When you put that on top of your yield, it does put buy-to-let into perspective as a good investment as well, doesn't it? The forecast rises to 4% and 6.5% for 2023 and 4.5% for 2024. That's what they think. What do you think? Really interested to see what you have to say to this in the comments below. If you're watching on Rightmove, or if you're watching on YouTube rather, or if you're watching on one of our Facebook channels. So really interested to see your thoughts on this. My thoughts are, it does entirely depend, of course, on a couple of things. Number one, the pandemic. You know, at the moment we are in a mess, aren't we, with this pandemic? We do have these different vaccines rolling out now, including a nasal one coming up, which I'm really excited about, and hopefully that will start to slow the spread. But right now, it's a nightmare and a mess, isn't it? So the first thing I would say is that we are totally dictated by the pandemic, and that will be the overarching factor in house prices regardless. Now, on from that, what I suspect will happen is that by the summer, I don't think by the spring, I think probably by the summer, we'll be in a better place, and we'll see the hospital admissions start to tail off, and people will start to be released from lockdown. And as that happens, I expect that will fuel a new wave of optimism, because it's a feel-good factor, isn't it? Hey, we're released, things are back to normal. Industry will start moving again. People will start getting back to work. Those that have been locked down for a long time, particularly those without outdoor space, will be really keen to get moving on. Now, what's the problem with the market right now? The problem is that people in flats can't move. Why is that? Number of reasons. Number one, the incentive scheme the government's put in place with the stamp duty doesn't give any incentive for first-time buyers to buy, because they've already got the discount for first-time buyers. So there's no incentive for them to buy right now. But it's worse than that. The deposits required for any first-time buyer now, sensibly, for a decent rate, and when I say decent rate, even that's double what you'd pay if you're a second-time borrower. But we're talking about very high rates if you have a 20% deposit. I mean, first-time buyers, 20% deposit, London prices, these things just don't go together, do they? And that's the reason why there's a glut of flats on the market, and it's the reason why flats aren't selling well and houses are selling very well. That may change, however. What may happen, and this is what I'm really hopeful of, if the government get this right and they've got a golden opportunity, Boris, if you're watching, listen carefully. This new incentive scheme you're talking about, giving buyers a chance for a 95% mortgage by some sort of underwrite process, I guess, with the lenders, would allow first-time buyers with a smaller deposit to get onto the housing ladder. This, in turn, will release many from the nightmare that they've been facing, especially given in the light of the EWS1 and the Grenfell scandal, and many additional fire restrictions and charges that have been put onto blocks. It's an absolute nightmare for flat owners it's been. But all of a sudden, if you release first-time buyers and they can buy a place instead of renting, and you give them the incentive to do that by a time limit, then you'll find you have the same impact on that end of the market that you've already had on the middle market. At the moment, anything up to 500,000 is saving £15,000. £15,000. Now, arguably, that's taken out in the price rises we've had already. But the point is, people see that as cold, hard cash that they can save right now if they're buying up to 500,000. If you could show first-time buyers that they were saving a large amount of money in a similar way, i.e. by giving them the opportunity on a time-limited way of buying into property. But the key thing is, this should not be new build. Should not be new build. The mistake the government always make is they come up with a scheme and they say, oh yeah, you can do this. We'll grant you the deposit if it's new build. Then what happens is the big developers get involved. And as usual, they're all about the money. What do? They up the prices so that the price of the things that should be at the price where first-time buyers can afford them then go out of reach again. And this is self-defeating. So in other words, you give first-time buyers the opportunity to get on board. All of a sudden, you have a glut of first-time buyers available. This pushes up the price of the new build flats available. Developers knee-jerk very quickly. They're good at that, and increase the prices and squeeze the first-time buyers. If you open up a first-time buyer scheme to the whole of market, then what will happen is that all of a sudden, the flat sellers that have been in misery for the last few years, especially for the last year, have a chance of selling. Guess what happens when those flat buyers have a chance of selling? They buy. And what do they buy? The mid-range houses. And because they bought the mid-range houses, guess what? The upper end starts to move better as well. So this has a knock-on effect, always has had. And at the moment, the missing link in the property market is the first-time buyer. We are literally, the amount of first-time buyers out there is very low. Those fortunate enough with a very large deposit are jumping straight into houses. Flat buyers are few and far between. So if you can rebalance that in the right way by offering a 95% mortgage again, underwriting the lender's risk, because the reason lenders are not giving large percentage mortgages is because they consider there's a market risk, partly brought about by the stamp duty deadline, of course. They see that as perhaps an artificial bubble. Of course, they're worried about the pandemic as well. So all of a sudden, if you can underwrite these things and you reassure the lenders, and also another thing I would do with the lenders is restrict them from overcharging on the loans. I really do think that it's unreasonable to be charging first-time buyers 4% when you've got other borrowers actually borrowing and getting rates of 1.9%. It's just not equitable. And again, it feels like profiteering. And I just think if the government could get hold of that, if they're underwriting the majority of the risk up to, say, 25, 30%, then the lenders don't have the additional risk. Then the rates should be the same as they are for second timers. And if you do that, you incentivize first time buyers because A, the mortgage rate's cheaper, B, they don't have to raise a massive deposit, and C, those second timers can sell those flats, move out, move on and get on with their lives and get the outdoor space that they crave, or perhaps that office. So that's my rant over for the day. And that's what I think is going to happen. That's what I hope is going to happen. What I think is going to happen, probably they'll get it wrong, frankly. They usually do. They usually miss an opportunity like this to get things right, don't they? We'll see. It could be that they extend the stamp duty. I would be delighted if they did. But I think it's really important to incentivize first-time buyers to really kickstart the whole of the market. And I just think we should be supporting them more, those getting on the ladder, because without them, there will always be a stagnation at the lower end of the market. And it's unnecessary. We can get around this with the right legislation in place and the right incentives in place that can help the whole of the UK economy, just as this stamp duty discount has. So please, Boris, get on it. If they do nothing, what will happen after the stamp duty deadline? I suspect you'll have many buyers requesting reductions from their vendors because of the extra expense they'll have in buying the house, i.e. the 3% or 15K that they have, inverted commas, lost. And there'll be lots of arguments over whose fault that is. We're already seeing a lot of pressure coming from buyers and sellers in terms of timing, trying to make sure they get in ahead of that deadline, which is understandable, frankly, because it's a lot of money involved. I see a lot of chains will then go up and down the chains and try and achieve that discount for everybody, so that if it does come to that, then perhaps there'll be a negotiation right the way through the chain with everybody saying, okay, well, we'll concede the 15,000 right the way down to the beginning of the chain. So there could be a temporary drop off right there at that point of deadline. But I think quite soon afterwards, what you'll see is that unless there's good incentive out there for people to sell, the market will quieten down. It won't be a case of it'll fall off a cliff, because sellers just won't sell. The only way they'll sell is if they think the market is solid and there's a really good chance of a sale at a reasonably fair price for the current market. Other than that, it will stagnate. So hopefully they get hold of the bottom of the market and they kickstart this whole thing. And that's what I'd really like to see, is that first-time buyer incentive scheme perfected in such a way that it brings up those first-time buyers and therefore takes the place of the stamp duty incentive. So we'll see. Who knows? Let us know in the comments what you think. Hope you're having a great day. Stay safe and well. Here in SW16, it is overcast and grey. Got a busy day ahead. So stay safe. We'll be back same time tomorrow.